From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and today's lineup includes K-State's Glynn Tonsor. He'll have the latest update on domestic beef demand, an increasingly positive story for the cattle industry, and Glynn shares his new numbers on the expected returns to retaining ownership of fall calves. Then K-State's A.J. Tarpoff joins Sarah Moyer to talk about the importance of administering the proper dosage of vaccines to cattle at the working chute. He addressed this topic at the recent K-State Beef Stocker Field Day. Further ahead, this week's 4-H segment, K-State's Deryl Waldren announces that applications are being taken for the assortment of Kansas 4-H International Exchange programs taking place in 2018. All that and more right here on Agriculture Today.
Agriculture and food systems are the main drivers of the Kansas economy, but must be improved in order to feed the world's growing population. How are we going to do so? Reduce food loss, find ways to preserve grasslands, and help families stretch their dollars. Global food systems is one of the 5 grand challenges K-State Research and Extension is addressing. To learn more, visit www.ksre.ksu.edu.
As you look at the cattle market scene from this past week, the news was a mixed bag of friendly and maybe not so much, and we'll dig into all of that right here with our guest. Glynn Tonsor is a livestock economist with K-State Research and Extension. Just quickly looking back at the cash and futures trades last week, a downward tone for the most part, although there was some recovery, Glynn.
Yeah, I would call the week as a whole mixed, and the downtone was early in the week. It was a carryover from the fairly bearish cattle and feed report, which Jim Robb broke down last week. Mm-hmm. And then we had some kind of holding to the fort in the middle of the week and then some recovery into the week. So with any luck, that was just a one-week response. But narrowly, the cash market for the week was down about $1. When we look at the 5 market fed cattle, prices were just below 108. When you go over the board while we're on fed cattle, October was 109 and change, down about $2.50 for the week. Most of that was we had a limit down day on Monday, a little bit down on Tuesday, and we had some recovery, as I said. And I chalked most of that up to what's called reaction to the cattle and feed report. When we look over to feeder cattle, cash, very, very mixed during the week. There were several markets that traded Monday and Tuesday were down up to like $10 per hundredweight. And then as we moved on towards the end of the week, there was actually some on Friday that were up $5. So again, I think there was some adverse spillover just in the tone in the general cattle complex that showed up early in the week. And then we had some positive demand stuff that I'll get to in a moment that showed up at the end of the week. October feeder cattle on the board was 152 and change. That was down more than $4 for the week. And again, as like a broken record here, that was all based on Monday and Tuesday, a limit down day again. So those cattle and feed reports get watched. It's not the first time we've seen that. The bearish tone there would be is there going to be a wall of cattle coming next spring? How are we going to work our way through that? To me, there wasn't a big surprise in that. It's just kind of a timing and a jumpiness. We knew those cattle were out there just when they're going to show up, and now we're going to figure out how to push them through the system and find a market for those beef pounds in March, April, May of next year. That's what we're really watching now. That sets the stage for watching demand. So there's not a lot of uncertainty on supply. We know there's growing supplies. It's well stated by my colleagues around the country. They're always on this series. We have more beef being produced now than we did a year ago. We're going to have even more in 2018, the best we can tell. The good news is demand so far in 2017 has been stronger than most anticipated. So we actually have year-over-year increases in feeder cattle prices that, to my knowledge, no people really saw coming, except the most optimistic folks, which I'm not always in that camp. So that's a pleasant surprise. So to understand that demand part, let's break down the cutout values this week and then maybe some more updates on the demand front. The Friday cutout values for choice were actually up $5 from the prior week, 196 and change. Importantly, when you look, that was almost all driven by the rib primal. Rib primal was up almost 8% for the week. I don't have any grand insights on why that strength, but I will note it wasn't an across the board. Not all the primals were up 3% or anything like that. It was driven by one primal. So that's important to monitor because I hope it holds, but if it's relying on one primal, that's a little bit concerning going forward. Select was basically flat for the week, just below 189. So we had a good positive demand signal somewhere in this story on choice rib. But beyond that, the cutout values were basically flat, so we need to monitor that for this upcoming week. when you look over to another demand update before I give some projections for prices going forward, is some of our listeners might know myself and Ted Schroeder had the opportunity to do some work for the Beef Board as Checkoff funded. Back in February, we talked about it at the NCBA convention, and recently I've been able to update some of that work. So basically, we have updated grocery store retail beef demand indices for the first 6 months of 2017, and the story is very strong there. I encourage anybody who wants those details to go to beefboard.org or email me, and I'll get the report to you. But the punchline would be is across the board, grocery store retail beef demand is stronger than it was back in November of 2016, which is where I stopped these last numbers I was talking back in February. And that's important because I've been alluding to it, and several people have kind of reinforced this message. More and more supply. In the absence of demand growth, we would have quite a bit lower cattle prices across the board than we have today. And it's important to remember that demand strength. This, I'm speaking to grocery store domestic demand strength to reinforce the fact that's well documented as export demand strength is very, very strong in 2017. I surely hope that continues, holds power, if not continues to grow going into 2018 as we have more pounds coming onto the system.
Lending more numbers to that analysis that you just referred to here, you say that certain cuts have really been the underpinning for this overall growth.
Yeah, so we have an aggregate, total U.S. across all regions, across all beef product index, and then we break it down by region, and then as you alluded to, we break it down by product. So there is a ground demand index, there's a loin, and then there's a couple of others as well that I won't talk about here. But the demand strength that's occurred early in 2017 is on both the ground beef and the loin front. And I highlight that because sometimes there's a debate. There's a well-recognized report by Rabobank sometime back of Ground Beef Nation, whether or not we need to be moving towards producing more ground beef. There is strong demand for ground beef in this country. I fully concur with that. But it's not only ground beef that's been paying the bill on the demand front. We also had some loin strength, which is very good because we're talking about very different products. We're often talking about different consumer segments that are interested in ground beef offerings, maybe as an ingredient into something else versus a higher-end loin product. You have different socioeconomic groups interested and different ethnic and cultural groups interested in that. I'm highlighting that because if you're not relying on one consumer base, that's a more robust demand front than if it was just one product line that was carrying the demand front. So that's really encouraging. And if you go further and you recognize just how many pounds go through that ground front in particular, if it is going up, again, not just the volume, but the demand for ground beef is going up. So we're getting higher prices than we expect given the higher volume we see in being produced. That's a very strong thing. So I hope to continue to see going forward more than just one category paying the bill.
And you mentioned the regional reads, if you will, and the northeast part of this country seems to be leading the way, which is encouraging given the population base there.
Yeah, exactly. And even the different eating habits in the northeast versus the Midwest here, for example. So what Dr. Schroeder and I did when we built these is we split the country into 4 regions. So we have a west, a south, a Midwest, and a northeast. Very intuitive, really, unique names for the regions here in the country. And all 4 regions are up here early in 2017, but the Northeast is the strongest of the 4. And I highlight that because that is the same region that may not have the same cultural background and the connection to production like we have largely here in the Midwest. And frankly, I think that's a really good thing. I think here in the Midwest, we have a connection to the meat and we're used to eating it. And I suspect that'll be a more persistent, stable base going forward. If you have a region like the Northeast where you don't have maybe that same historical connection to production, and yet it is the region leading the way, that's a good sign. So I think that reflects, we've had some overall unemployment numbers come down across the country. The employment situation in the Northeast in aggregate is good. There's actually more talk about job mobility in the Northeast. Aggregate that up, maybe folks in the Northeast are even more comfortable with their economic standing and they're paying up for beef more than elsewhere in the country. So I'm speculating a little bit on why the Northeast might be the main region of the demand strength. But what I hope listeners take from that is it's no longer sufficient just to talk about U.S. beef, right? We have beef sold in many different products to different people through different channels. And the more fine-tuned we can measure that, the better we can allocate not just check-off resources, which is important as why the study was done, but more generally to help producers understand who it is that most values the product. And therefore you can cater to those needs and add the most value to the cutout, which adds value to fed cattle and feeder cattle.
If you'd like to see the specifics, again, go to www.beefboard.org for this latest retail beef demand update. There, it's good reading and certainly an encouraging proposition for the markets. You have put together the latest numbers on the value of gain for the fall calf crop. Again, producers likely still in the process, Glynn, of making decisions on what they will do market-wise with those calves, retain or sell. What do your numbers tell us at the moment?
Yeah, it's the time of year for those final decisions, particularly if you still own the calf crop. But even if you don't, right, somebody else is going to make the same margin decision. But real quickly, I just use the Salina market is a 5.5 pound calf. Let's say it was going to be sold October 11th, just for context. Current best projection per that beefbasis.com resource is a sale price of $163. So the question is, what could you do to add pounds? What would those pounds be worth? So if you were to just do some simple backgrounding exercise and add 50 pounds, so take that animal up to 600 pounds, and let's say sell it the middle of November, add basically a pound per day, then you'd have a projected sale price of $158. That's a value of gain of $104 per hundredweight, $52 per head. You're putting 50 pounds on. That's pretty attractive for somebody that's interested in that, particularly if you can get a preconditioning benefit with that, which I haven't added to that. So if you can get another kind of claim when you do it. Now, of course, there's market risk in that. The market could work against you in that month. If you're interested in going further, maybe putting more weight on all the way up to, say, 800 pounds out till middle of next March, currently projecting basically a 142 price, be a yearling at that point, value of gain of about $95 per hundredweight, about $237 per head. Again, I think that's a lot higher than most people's cost of gain would be projected to be. Everybody's cost of gain is going to vary, and they need to make that comparison. But both of those examples, I'm highlighting them because the market is signaling for somebody to take that risk and put those additional pounds on. And somebody in the system will. Collectively, we will put those pounds on those animals. It's just a matter of whether it's a cow-calf operator that chooses to do it themselves or somebody else in the chain. I highly encourage you to monitor the costs that go with those, but these are encouraging projected value gain numbers.
So put your pencil to it and see if that works out for you, but the overall tone of that is that it could well be a paying proposition for retaining ownership of those calves.
Yes.
Well, Glynn maintains a steady stream of this kind of information on the agmanager.info website, so check all of that out at agmanager.info. And always a pleasure, Glynn. Thanks for coming over.
Thanks for having me on, Eric.
Featured on this week's cattle market segment, Glynn Tonsor, livestock economist with K-State Research and Extension. And you're tuned to Agriculture Today. After this break, we'll hand it on over to Sarah Moyer and her guest as they'll take up yet another topic that was covered at that K-State Beef Stalker Field Day just a few days back. This time concentrating on chute-side cattle vaccine management. That's coming right up here on the K-State Radio Network. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. I'm Sarah Moyer. K-State recently held their annual Beef Stalker Field Day at that respective unit, and in attendance were producers from across the state. One of the presentations during the day focused on cattle processing and proper dosages for some of those products that are being administered. And here to help us out on the topic and give us some reminders, we have K-State Extension Beef Veterinarian AJ Tarpoff. Good to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
One of the first and maybe one of the most important reminders for producers would be the variance in cattle that they may have coming through the chute.
It really is. When we start talking about how big a spread can we have in these animals coming in on arrival? It's not unheard of to have a 300-pound difference from our lightest animal to our heaviest animal. And for years, it's been acceptable that how do we dose appropriately to these groups or lots of animals? Well, a lot of cattle that have come in, historically, it's been everything was dosed on an average, okay? And then we can start getting into the conversation, get into the weeds about what average? Is it the purchase weight? Is it the arrival weight? Is it the arrival weight plus some shrink? So what weight are we using? And a lot of the times it ends up, it's not very accurate, especially when we start looking at that weight break and the weight variation in between animals. And making sure that we have the proper dosage. And common things that we give at processing, perhaps it's a parasiticide. Okay, we use parasiticides during different times and classes of animals and also at arrival into our stocker backgrounders or feedlots. Another one that's probably even more important is our antimicrobial therapy. We may be using some type of metaphylaxis treatment to help control disease on arrival. So those are very important products that we have.
And, producers maybe would come back with a question, how much discrepancy or how much variation should they be looking to change when they are processing?
Okay, well, the best way to do it is we actually accurately dose each individual. Okay, easier said than done. That takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of time, and I completely understand that. I pulled some older data from actually a cattleman study that my predecessor actually put together using the stocker unit database. So they took all the animals that came into the stocker unit, checked on what the averages of each individual lots would have been, and really tried to figure out, okay, if everything was dosed on the average coming in, how close were we? It was just over 6,200 head in the database. And what they actually found was a little bit concerning, okay? But this is real life. These are real animals coming in, that if they were dosed on the average, 27% of those animals would have been overdosed by 10% or more. And on the other side is the degree of underdosing. Out of that 6,200 head, 22% would have been underdosed. Let's kind of break that down into what are the effects of overdosing, what are the effects of underdosing any of these products, regardless of if it's a parasiticide or if it's an antimicrobial. When we underdose, products are actually given that label due to a dose titration. Okay, so they figure out what they want the desired effect to be from those products, and it's a very specific dosage that's usually given like a milliliter or a cc per 100 pounds. If we are underdosing, the product isn't living up to its expectation. Okay, it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Now, on the other side is overdosing. Okay, we can measure the effects of overdosing pretty easy because it's ultimately product wastage. We don't get any added benefit from overdosing these products. So from those 27% that were overdosed in this data group, this is simple cowboy math. But if I start looking at it, we had animals in that group that were overdosed even upwards to 25%. Were overdosed. So 25% wastage. Modern day numbers, let's look at, for instance, a 600-pound calf that was overdosed 20%. And in this database, there would have been 204 animals that were overdosed at that rate. Say it's one of our more expensive products that we're administering, so let's put a $5 per hundredweight treatment cost on there. Okay, it's not unheard of. So at a 20% overdose rate, over that 204 animals that would have been overdosed, it's over $1,200 of wastage. So $1,200 that we just wasted over those 200 head animals, that adds up really quick. Okay, that's over 6,000 head. If you extrapolate that out to a couple of years, that overdosing is a real issue, and it is an economic issue.
So not only can producers make some small changes and work to get better at this, but it can have a financial impact and some financial benefits and motivations for producers to be looking at that. And as you mentioned, this also encourages product efficacy and how effective it is, right? It
really is. Product efficacy, the misperceptions of, it just didn't work like it should have. We still had some lungworm issues in these cattle that we recently dewormed. A lot of those, it all comes down to proper dosing. Okay, if we expect a certain outcome, these animal health products, they cost money. These are investments in the cattle health of these animals moving forward. So it's really important that we administer them correctly. That's the last step. We need to handle those animals appropriately, need to handle the products appropriately, but we have to administer them appropriately. Especially in modern times, we are concerned about different resistance type issues, both in our parasiticides and our livestock, but also the concerns about antimicrobial resistance and the prudent use of antimicrobials. So it is extremely important to be dosing by the correct weight on these individual animals.
What would you say are some of the long-term effects here of good management practices related to dosage?
Best management practices is it really comes down to, number one, first and foremost, pre-harvest food safety. Okay, we are beef producers. We are creating a product that's going to go into the human food chain. So ensuring that it's accurately dosed so we have an accurate meat withdrawal before those animals go to slaughter, that is paramount. Secondary to that is the economic benefit of ensuring that we're getting the best investment from that product and we're not overdosing and we're not wasting anything. Thankfully, on the horizon, there are some new technologies to help make this happen.
And at the Beef Stalker Field Day that took place here recently, there were some demonstrations and some exposure for producers to just kind of get them thinking about what technologies are on the horizon and what are new to the market. Would you talk about some of the types of products that we're seeing and what are some others that you're aware of?
There's some technologies that are hitting the market currently that are answering and helping with a lot of these issues that we deal with when we're individually dosing a group of animals. I talked about time, I talked about effort from our employees, consistency, control on what is being administered and how it's being administered. It's very difficult to manage sometimes. Changing the dose rate on some of our syringes over and over and over again, it's difficult. It takes time, it takes effort. We need to make sure that our employees are actually doing that appropriately. The new technologies are fully automated. The person still administers either the dose as a pour-on, a drench, an injection, but it's automated dosing. Okay, so the animal walks into the chute, it gets a weight from the load cells, gets sent to the scale head. Automatically, we've already plugged in what our dosage rate is. Some of the new technologies, these automated dosing syringes, it automatically adjusts for whatever the weight of that animal is. It can read individual identification numbers, so we can have proper recording and records for each individual animal, how much of what product was administered, what day, and its weight. So we can actually gather these data points. And at the end of the day, what's really neat that I really enjoy about some of these products is when we start looking at quality control within our own operations, we can go back through and say, oh, we just ran through 200 head of animals. You can actually go and verify that, yes, 200 doses of whatever product was actually administered. We can guarantee that we've actually administering these products correctly.
So there are some record-keeping benefits, and of course, technologies like that are more suitable to some different sizes of operations versus maybe some smaller. There is a scope there of where this might be most beneficial at this time, but it's certainly something that's in development and good for producers to be aware of out in the market. That being just one part of cattle processing, why is this one of those key ones?
This is one of the key ones. I'll hit a little bit more on just the effort that it takes to actually administer these products. Anybody that's processed cattle, administered large volume products like some of our pour-ons, it's hard on us. Okay, regardless of our age, regardless of who we are, if you have to use a syringe and administering 60 cc's on the top line all day, our hands, our wrists, carpal tunnel, some of those issues, ease of use really comes in handy. These automated dosing syringes actually have an automatic plunger, so it actually saves some of our employee base from having any breakdown, having any fatigue type issues. So I see that as a huge benefit. Number two is consistency. Okay? We always talk about proper dosing and beef quality assurance. These new technologies are taking that into account, and there's actually beef quality assurance stop checks. If we're using an injectable form of any type of product, there's a BQA stop check of 10 cc's per injection site. So we can ensure that we're not going to run into too much product in one injection site, end up with injection site lesions, end up with scarring of the muscle, end up with more trim later into the processing stage after slaughter. So all of these are huge benefits that are separate, that these are kind of industry good checkpoints, apart from the individual operator where they can actually see the employee benefits, they can see the economic benefits of proper dosing, and we can see product efficacy where it should be. And then we can track to make sure these products are administered correctly, but we actually got the desired effect. Because if they're not working like they should, we need some more information to figure out why.
Many ways to look at this new technology and the concept in general, so that's something to be watching, and I think a really interesting story for producers to hear about. Thank you for coming on and sharing with us today, AJ.
It was a pleasure.
That was K-State Extension Beef Veterinarian, AJ Tarpoff. Again, he was one of the presenters talking about cattle processing and proper dosages for product at the K-State Beef Stalker Field Day. I'm Sarah Moyer, and this is Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
You're tuned in to the K-State Radio Network, and Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And moving on now to today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. The Kansas Department of Agriculture has announced that the State Conservation Commission has approved the creation of the Kansas Wildfire Cost Share Initiative, which will provide funding in the amount of $200,000 for specific recovery expenses following the recent wildfires in Kansas. Funds from the initiative are to be targeted at livestock water supplies, cross-fencing, grass seeding, windbreaks, and obstruction removal in the areas affected by the March Kansas wildfires of this year, as well as the Anderson Creek wildfire in 2016. Now, the eligible areas for the initiative are in the following counties: Barber, Clark, Comanche, Ellis, Ellsworth, Ford, Hodgman, Lane, Lincoln, McPherson, Meade, Ness, Reno, Rice, Rooks, Russell, Seward, and Smith counties. Cost share assistance will be provided by the KDA's Division of Conservation through the local county conservation districts. Landowners in the eligible counties are urged to contact their local county conservation district to apply for the initiative. Applications can be submitted through October the 31st, and county conservation district contact information can be found at agriculture.ks.gov. Any questions regarding this Kansas Wildfire Cost Share Initiative may be directed to the KDA's David Jones. His email address is david.jones@ks.gov. What does the USDA's latest look at grain stocks and small grain production reveal about this year's crops and supplies? Those reports were released this past Friday, and here's a recap from the USDA's Rod Bain.
Significantly more corn and soybeans in ending stocks and less wheat in ending supplies. The summary from the Agriculture Department's latest grain stocks report. Corn stocks are up 32% from this time last year, and soybean stocks are up 53% year over year. Of particular note with soybeans, on-farm storage numbers rose 112% from 2016. All wheat stocks for 2017 are reported down 11% from the previous year. USDA's latest small grain summary was also issued Friday, with all wheat production for this year at 1.74 billion bushels. That's down 25% from revised numbers for 2016. Harvested acres decreased 14% year over year, and yield for this year's crop is estimated down over 6 bushels per acre from last year. Lower production is estimated for winter, other spring, and durum wheat for 2017. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Corn growers enrolled in the Price Loss Coverage Program should receive a payment of around 34 cents per bushel on last year's crop, while wheat growers should receive $1.61 per bushel. The USDA released the final market year average price for key commodities this past week, determining price loss coverage payments for the 16-17 market year. The Farm Service Agency should release final county yields for the 16-17 crop this week. That would generate then the formula for the ARC County payments nationally. Farm program payments for the old crop will be delivered later this month. For corn, a $3.36 per bushel final market year average price means that farmers who enrolled in the price loss coverage would have a payment rate of 34 cents per bushel on their base acres. That's based on the $3.70 floor reference price for corn written into the 2014 Farm Bill. PLC, though, was the program of choice on only 6 million base acres nationally because more than 90 million acres are enrolled in ARC County for corn. Now, wheat farmers enrolled in PLC will have that payment rate of $1.61 per bushel due to the market year average of $3.89 per bushel subtracted from the $5.50 per bushel reference price. Roughly 27 million wheat base acres are enrolled in PLC, while 35 million acres are enrolled in ARC County. And grain sorghum producers enrolled in PLC would see a payment rate of $1.16 per bushel based on the $2.79 market year average price subtracted from the $3.95 reference price. Farmers enrolled just shy of 6 million acres in PLC for sorghum, compared to just under 3 million enrolled in ARC County. And soybean farmers will not collect a PLC payment due to the market year average price of $9.47 per bushel. That is higher than the $8.40 reference price. You're listening to Agriculture Today, and now on to the weekly feature from the Kansas Forest Service here at K-State, Tree Tales. Awaiting with that is K-State Forester Charlie Barden. Charlie?
Fall can be a great season to plant new trees in the landscape if some precautions are taken. The prime season for this is from mid-September to late October. Evergreens should be planted definitely by mid-October to give them an adequate chance to reestablish new roots before winter begins. Deciduous tree species which lose their leaves in winter can be planted even later into the fall, even as late as Thanksgiving. The difference between the deciduous and evergreen trees is that evergreens use more water during the winter than hardwoods, which drop their leaves. Thus, most conifers need about 6 weeks of mild weather to settle into their new home before the cold shuts down root growth for the winter. When planting a containerized tree, one that came in a pot, make sure to unwrap or cut any girdling roots that are circling around the root ball. These girdling roots will not unwrap on their own after planting, will continue to grow in diameter, and may interfere with the growth of the trunk or taproot. Especially if you want to add a tree to your yard for its bright-colored autumn foliage, October is an ideal time to visit nurseries and find a tree with that color. The tendency to develop bright fall colors is genetically controlled with some climate and weather influence, so buying a tree in the fall already showing these colors help ensure that tree will color up nicely in your landscape every year. For all fall plantings, make sure you water the tree in very well. Large landscape trees may require watering every week during the winter if it is very dry, and this is especially important for the evergreens. Also, apply a thick layer of mulch to the ground after it really turns cold, usually in early December. This will protect the tender new roots from harsh fluctuations in soil temperature and prevent frost heaving damage. You've been listening to Tree Tales. I'm Charles Barden at Forest with K-State Research and Extension.
All right, Charlie, thanks. And we do want to take this one last opportunity to remind you about the upcoming annual Forestry Field Day this very Wednesday, just north of Manhattan, co-sponsored by K-State Research and Extension and the Kansas Forest Service. This is the 23rd such field day. The day will get going with registration at 8:30 in the morning. The program itself starting at 9 o'clock. Forest stand improvement, controlling invasive plants, Kansas wood products, wildlife management and woodlands, and a woodland owner panel on the program, plus much more. It is an excellent day out on Wednesday, October the 4th, if you can take it in. Again, the 23rd Annual Fall Forestry Field Day, co-hosted by K-State Research and Extension and the Kansas Forest Service, among a number of agencies. For full information, check this website, www.kansasforests.org. Once more, it's all at kansasforests.org. You're listening to Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
This Agriculture Today concludes on the Kansas 4-H beat once more, and with another important deadline looming, and this time for participating in the rich array of 4-H International Exchange opportunities for 2018. Deryl Waldren is along with us once again. He's the Research and Extension 4-H Specialist for K-State in Northwest Kansas, and he coordinates these activities each and every year. And we come back to it, Deryl. Kansas 4-H has had a long-standing and successful run with its involvement in international exchange, correct?
That's correct, Eric. Kansas was actually one of the original states to participate with the International 4-H Youth Exchange in 1948. Nearly 70 years ago, we were part of the first group of 17 who went to Europe after World War II to try to make world peace through understanding.
And that is the idea, to expose young people to other cultures, other venues for learning about leadership, and so forth.
Correct. And it comes down to that we have far more similarities and commonalities than we do differences, and by going on exchange programs or hosting on exchange programs in Kansas, people learn that we're really more similar than we think. And this is a cornerstone of Kansas 4-H International Exchange programs, that for both going and hosting here is that we do have that host family exchange stay where participants stay with the host family, whether it be going abroad or here in Kansas, where they get that experience of living with a family. And really experiencing how that family lives in their everyday life.
You have two organizations Kansas 4-H works with to arrange these, Deryl.
We do. We work with States 4-H International Exchange programs out of Seattle, Washington, and they conduct all the programs for 4-H members who are of 4-H age from 12 through 19. And then we also work with the National IFI Association, which works with the IFI program. And so Kansas this year, for example, in 2017 sent 2 IFIs to countries in Europe, and one of them also participated with a country in Asia.
Let's take up the programs then. First of all, for current 4-Hers, you have several destinations here that are attractive, aren't they not?
Yes, for 2018, participants, 4-H members currently in Kansas could go to one of 4 countries. They could go to Japan, and that could be either for 4 weeks or 8 weeks. If they go 8 weeks, they have a little bit longer language. They have 4 weeks of language studying and stay with a second host family. They could also go to Costa Rica, Norway, or South Korea. And so those are 4 wide variety options for around the world.
Mm-hmm. Then there's the IFI option for those who have, if you will, graduated from 4-H but would still like to take full advantage of this exchange opportunity. Are the countries there identified at this point?
Yes. Like you say, IFI is for alumni of the Kansas 4-H program, and they tend to be European countries, but also we've added some Asian countries. They would have a possibility for Thailand or South Korea and perhaps some other ones. But the bulk are still in Europe. And we work with the prospective applicant to find their interest and see if we can find or arrange for them to go to the countries of their interest.
And these are of longer duration, these exchanges, up to a half a year.
Yes, they tend to be from 3 to 6 months, so I think the minimum would be 2 months for them to participate as an International 4-H Youth Exchange or IFI delegate.
So the process of applying and what sorts of things an applicant should emphasize as they attempt to land one of these exchange opportunities, Deryl?
Well, we have 2 distinct application packages that are on the Kansas 4-H website. So they not only have to give basic information, but do a little essay as to where they want to go, why they want to go, and provide some other information for us. So to find that application, you would go to kansas4h.org, and again, that's KANSAS4-H.org. On the homepage, click on What's Hot, and it'll take you to the specific homepage under Global Citizenship where they could download the app and fill it out and get it returned to us by November 1st.
So you've roughly a month to take care of that. You're also looking for host families for incoming exchange students?
We will be early into next year. Kansas 4-H has participated with the Kansas 4-H Japanese Exchange since 1977, so we celebrated the 40th anniversary this year. So we'll be hosting about 28 Japanese from 12 to 15 next summer, as well as a couple of chaperones. Families will also have the opportunity to host somebody from Finland, Costa Rica, or South Korea. We will be hosting those with families. They'll be coming to Kansas for about 1 month next year.
So are you taking interest from host families at this point for those?
We will be early into the new year in 2018. We'll have all that set up with the application. But right now, I mean, they could email us, but we're not really in the mode to accepting host families for 2018, but we will be shortly. We'll also need several host families for the Kansas IFI program exchange next summer in Kansas. That information will be on the same website. Click on What's Hot under the Kansas 4-H homepage, and it will take you to all the information about hosting either an S4H exchangee or an IFI.
There are several contacts that one can make as well, all listed on the Kansas 4-H website, including yourself, Deryl. If one would like to know more about the details of these exchanges, what all is entailed, and again, participation possibilities.
I want to mention one more program that States 4-H offers, and that's the academic year program, and that's where students from predominantly Japan, South Korea, as also the former Soviet republics, can come to Kansas for the school year, and they live with a host family. Currently, we have 2 high school members who are in Kansas for this current school year.
Kansas4h.org. And just as a parting thought, Deryl, you have been deeply involved in these programs as a former participant, as a matter of fact. These can't really be matched in as far as something that youth can gain from.
Yes, these exchange programs help young adults prepare a global perspective and their personal sense of place in the world. 4-H exchange programs allow families a good way not only to host, but also to send their 4-H members or young adults on safe programs around the world to get that perspective that they need to thrive in the 21st century.
Excellent. Well, once again, explore the 2018 Kansas 4-H International Exchange Opportunities at kansas4h.org, where you'll find the application details and forms due November the 1st. To stress that one more time. Deryl, thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for letting me talk to you today.
Deryl Waldren with us, Research and Extension 4-H Specialist for K-State, telling us about this variety of exchange opportunities for Kansas 4-H youth and alumni coming up in this next calendar year. That is this week's Kansas 4-H segment. Thanks for listening in today. For Sarah Moyer, Eric Atkinson, this has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.